大家好，欢迎收看由澳大利亚商业文化基金会以及聚澳中文台共同出品的高端直播访谈节目《澳洲零距离》。本期节目的主题为联邦议员面对面，2025年民众最关心的3件事。我是今天的主持人 Aaron， 非常高兴在联邦大选之际，与大家一同在聚澳当前最热的3大民生议题：生活成本、医疗系统和社会安全。2024年过去了，而生活压力似乎并没有减轻，房租越来越高，牛排的价格越来越贵，看病也越来越难了。孩子们放学回家，路上是不是安全，也让很多父母非常的担忧。今天我们邀请到了3位联邦的候选人来跟我们实打实的讨论一下，不聊套话，不讲空话，听听他们如何解答大家民众所关心的问题。Today we are joined the studio by federal MPs, the Keith Wolohan, the federal member for Menzies, Dr. Katie Allen, the Liberal candidate for Chisholm, Ms. Amelia Hammer, the Liberal candidate for Kooyong. Would you like to introduce yourself to our audience?
Yeah. Me first?
Go for it, Amelia.
Okay. Do you want to do the...
Yeah, sure. If I could just kick off as the sitting member, that just the context of us being here, authorised by me, Keith Wolohan, Liberal Party, Doncaster. But I think with that being said, we'll hand over to Amelia to introduce herself.
So my name's Amelia Hamer. I'm the Liberal candidate for Kooyong, and where Kooyong is it goes all the way to from Prahran to Balwyn North. So that's the suburbs like Kew, like Canterbury, Hawthorn, Camberwell, Balwyn, Balwyn North, and then down in Toorak, Malvern and Armidale.
That is a well-recognised rich areas.
Well, it's a pretty nice place to live, and I think the people, all the people in my community think it's a nice place to live.
Yeah, we're pretty sure a lot of Chinese Australians live in these areas, and it's good to show your face to our audience and tell you your policies.
Absolutely, I'm excited to do that.
Great.
My name's Keith Wolohan. I'm the current member for Menzies. And Menzies, if you don't know, takes in most of Manningham, so Doncaster, Templestowe, Bulleen, through to Warrandyte, but then goes south of the Eastern Freeway to take in all of Box Hill, Mont Albert North, Surrey Hills, and then some of Blackburn North and Blackburn South. This is my first term. Before this, I was a barrister, a commercial barrister, and then did some time in the army, and in the same way that Aaron has as well. So
wow.
Thank you.
It's great. Keith also is a very superstar among the community. He shows his face. He's very engaged with the community like activities. So all the people know him, right?
That's very kind.
Superstar.
Thank you.
Katie Allen, doctor.
Ni hao, Aaron. It's great to be here. Thank you so much.
Great, doctor.
So I used to be a federal member for Parliament for Higgins, which was a seat that was abolished and divided 5 ways, and the largest part merged into Chisholm. So the seat of Chisholm, a beautiful seat. That starts from Wheelers Hill, Mount Waverley and Glen Waverley, Burwood, includes Chadstone, Malvern East, Glen Iris, Ashburton, a very large Chinese diaspora.
Yeah.
I used to be a paediatrician for 28 years at the Royal Children's Hospital and a professor of medicine at the University of Melbourne, an enterprise professor now.
Fantastic.
And mother of 4 children and a lovely husband.
Wow. And also Dr. Katie Allen also give me some very good advices, because when I have a hay fever, and give me really good tips. And that help me ease my symptoms a lot. So I appreciate that.
Always happy to help.
Okay, today we'll talk about 3 big topics. The first one is economy of Australia and the Trump tariffs. I think this is very hot news recently. The second one we will discuss about the community safety and the bail law reform. And third one we will talk about everybody is concerned about the healthcare systems. So we will starting from the first one, the economy and Trump's tariffs. So the United States has recently imposed a new round of tariffs on goods from multiple countries, which Australia also included. At the same time, the Reserve Bank of Australia is expected to start cutting interest rates in upcoming months. People are generally concerned, so in the face of these international changes, how can the government or its policies genuinely ease the financial pressures on households and give our wallets some relief?
I know Keith's been doing his reading on the tariffs lately.
No.
So.
Yeah.
Well, I think everyone watching is probably paying attention to this, whether it's their super fund or their share portfolio or just uncertainty in whether the normal trading patterns and rules that we have relied on for many decades are now all up in the air. And because they're all up in the air, I think the thing for us all to do is to just be calm and assess what's happening.
Yep.
Because this is an unprecedented trade war. We haven't seen this sort of trade war, at least with the United States, since back to the 1930s. Now, it shouldn't come as a surprise, but President Trump has always had a particular view on trade. He has seen it in a more transactional way, and he's been consistent with that view since the 1980s. It's unclear whether some of these are ambit claims to start a negotiation and whether they'll change and revert back closer to what we're used to, or whether this is a new era that we have to adapt to. So because we don't know the circumstances and context in which the change is being made, I think we just need to relax and just observe. And I know that's hard for people, particularly who are near retirement and are relying on their dividends. So watching the stock market at the moment is probably a little bit unnerving for people. But both parties, both major parties, including our party led by Peter Dutton, want to be very calm and put your interests first to make sure that we put Australia's interests first. The reason we are a prosperous, secure country is because of trade. We are a trading nation, so it is in our interests. And I think there's no debate about that. And again, many of your viewers have an economic interest in trade, and our largest trading partner is China. But the lesson from this, in all trade disputes, and we've had many with other countries, is to diversify our trade. So I think to the extent that businesses have an interest and are selling into the United States market, it's probably a good time to start looking at other markets. And we may even see more trade with China. And I'll conclude on this. Peter Dutton has said that he would like to see trade double with China. So when you engage with other countries, we all have our own interests and our own values, and we respect that they're different. But on trade, that is an example of where interests can work for each other. So it's in China's interests, it's in our interests. So that relationship is one that we would like to lean into.
And we are, as Keith said, a free trading nation, and we are very proud as Coalition of having organised so many free trade agreements. In fact, at one point, I think we were up to 78% of our trade was actually free trade agreements.
Including the China one in 2015.
Exactly, which is a very important historic occasion for this country. But it's important that, of course, trade leads to prosperity and, importantly, peace.
So I think, Amelia, you get our FanTech background.
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
That's very amazing. And what do you think about the economic for Australia in the future?
So my background, I have an economics degree, and I worked in finance and then worked in fintech as well. And I know many of your listeners might be interested in that. But I think what the biggest question is what is the impact of these tariffs going to be on inflation and the cost of living at home? How does this impact the prices of things in the grocery store? How does this impact all the different prices of the things that we have to buy to go about living our lives? Because inflation is really, you can have two types of inflation. So you can have your supply side inflation, which is driven by costs, and you can have your demand side inflation. Up until we've started talking about tariffs, a lot of the discussion was about demand side inflation, which is basically this idea that if the government spends lots of money and says we need to build this thing, well, they need to find the construction workers, so they need to pay people, and then people say, so they start by paying people $50 an hour, and then they can't find enough workers at $50 an hour, so they start offering $60 an hour. They can't find enough workers at $60 an hour, and they start offering $70. And then in the private sector, people were paying $50 an hour, and they go, we need to pay $60 now, we need to pay $70. And then suddenly in the private sector, they go, we need to put all our prices up in order to account for the fact that we're now paying people more from a wage perspective. So when the government puts lots of money into the economy, you get this, what we call the sort of wage price cycle, where you just keep pushing up the inflation. And we've been talking a lot about that over the last few years, because with the level of government spending that we've been seeing and the impact that that's had on the economy and the prices. Now what we're seeing is the second kind of inflation, which is your sort of cost push inflation, your supply side inflation. And what's going on there is that when we impose these tariffs, like let's say 10%, a 10% tariff, it actually pushes up all the costs of all the goods. And not only is it the cost coming into Australia, but it's all the additional tariffs that were, because you'll often get, someone was showing me the other day, they had a bag of frozen broccoli, and the frozen broccoli said on the back of it, it said packed in Spain from imported ingredients. And you just sort of thought, okay, so this broccoli has come from somewhere else entirely. It's gone to Spain, it's been frozen, and then it's ended up in Australia. Now, in a context of a tariff environment, the number of different tariffs that you might be paying in that process, if all the protectionist walls go up, actually adds a huge amount of incremental cost to business. So, and it means that people have to rethink their global supply chains, their routes. And so what you can now expect to see is also that supply side inflation, which means we've got to be really focused on how do we fix the cost of living.
I think there's a very famous video from the economist Milton Friedman. He takes a pencil and he said, there's a very simple item. It's not electronics, it's a pencil. And then he talks through all the various countries that mined the graphite, that carved the wood, that had the paint. And that complexity that led to a cheap pencil that you bought in the store, now magnify that many times over for an electronic device or a TV. And Amelia is absolutely right. We take for granted the complexity in the economic system. And the wonder of it all is that it's not directed from top down. It is everyone doing their own thing, coming together to produce cheaper, more reliable goods and services.
But Aaron, you know, we talked about, you know, we're coming up to federal election, and there is a big choice to be made about which direction the country will go in. You know, whether who's going to be in charge of the economic management of this country. And Keith, you talked before about superannuation. Labor has a policy it wants to push through, which is to tax our unrealised gains on superannuation. So, you know, as people watching their superannuation, you know, have a big dip with these tariff wars that are going on, it must make people who have large superannuation funds feel a little bit uncomfortable that they may be having to pay for unrealised gains when actually they haven't even earned the money yet.
Yes.
Yeah, that's great because we're all facing the challenges, and all the people, we'll talk about the topic. We come across a lot of questions. People are thriving to understand how if you get elected, how you provide better policies. And also we will talk about some like Medicare reform, and also for the community safety part, but we will talk about the question later. For this part, I will do a little bit translation to our viewers. 其实刚才我们这个两位联邦议员候选人，还有我们的 Kids 这个现任的议员有讨论到，在这种美国特朗普增加了关税的这个情况之下呢，我们是一定要把澳洲最关键的点是把澳洲的利益放在第一位，这个也是自由党他们最主要来体现的一个价值观，因为保证了我们澳洲人自己的利益，才能够保证我们的人民能有个更好的生活，所以他们会以这个为导向来进一步的去推动相应的政策。然后以澳洲的利益 Australia interest first. That's a very key points we take away, and people think that we have to work on that very hardly. All right, so we have come to the second one is about the community safety and about law reform. I think this community safety has been bothering people for a long time. We come across a lot of burglaries and also like some very serious incident happened in Doncaster or in Burwood, so elsewhere. So what do you think? So it's been a growing concern in Victoria about the youth crime, right? So and the repeated offenders. So the new amendment bill propose stricter restrictions. Can this reform effectively address the public safety concerns? And please share your views and policy positions. How do you think about that?
Well, I mean, the first thing to say is that we've all been door knocking so much into our respective electorates, and all of us have so, you know, very current stories. It's not a concern; it's actually a fact that crime is rising. It's risen quite significantly. And I was just door knocking yesterday with a TV crew behind me, and 2 houses responded. One saying, I'm worried about crime, but it was only concerned. The next one said, I was burgled last night for the second time. So it's very real. In fact, I sort of say this quote, and I said it to the ABC cameramen that were following me, that this might be the first time, but every single time I've been door knocking in the last year, someone has told me a story about crime. So the concerns are real, they're not made up. And it is the role of government to keep citizens safe and safe in their home and safe in their businesses. So we take this very seriously indeed. The issue is an issue with regarding to state police forces.
That's right.
Bail laws, which are actually under review at the moment at the state level. And the current leader of the opposition at the state level has a very firm line on making sure that those bail laws under pressure from the opposition are about to be reviewed. Not till September. I'm not sure why we have to wait that long. But there is an argument that some of the rise in crime is related to the changed bail laws that occurred in March last year. So, you know, people want to feel safe, they deserve to feel safe, and so do their businesses. But the other aspect of it is that the police force will tell you they're very under-resourced. We have a decrease in 15% of our police force here in Victoria, and there's a new EBA where police are about to take their unpaid sick leave because they can for a 6-month period, and there's expected to be a movement of police out of the police force. So the problem's going to get worse before it gets better. And if you don't have enough funds to pay for people's services,
That's right.
then you get into this sort of problem. So if you
no
don't have a
staff,
strong
we have no
economy,
people.
and if you don't manage money properly, then there's not enough money. You know, if there's too much debt, and we're paying our credit card debt every day with literally tens and hundreds of millions of dollars, then that money could be better served to frontline services like the police. So as a party, we feel very strongly that citizen safety is front and centre for Australians. And that's not just at the state level with regards to police force, but it's also for us to do with making sure that national laws like Jack's law and knife laws are standardised across the different states. But things like online security and cyber security and scamming is incredibly important as well.
Look, what's happened to echo what Katie's saying, what's happened in the state of Victoria is we've had bail laws that have kind of swung back and forward like a pendulum. Where something will happen, something will happen to someone in custody and we'll weaken the bail laws, and then there'll be some killings or something will happen, and then we'll tighten the bail laws again. And what we saw 18 months ago was a weakening of the bail laws to the extent that actually until a few weeks ago, it wasn't actually an offence to break the conditions of your bail in the state of Victoria. So if you were out on bail and they said you can't go out after 8 p.m, if you went out after 8 p.m, nothing would really happen. So you got to a point where you kind of had teenagers who go out night after night, and there are, depending on how you look at, between 300 and 500 offenders who are out fairly regularly, and they'd say to the police officer at the end of the night, "I'll see you tomorrow night." And we got to a point where there were basically no consequences for actions, and people weren't feeling safe in their homes. I door-knocked a lady the other week where she said that she had 3 guys come to her home with machetes, steal both the cars in the middle of the night. Very scary.
Very scary.
The police did a really good job. They picked them up, they arrested them, found them, everything happened the right way. The next night, the same 3 guys were back at her house again because they'd been let out on bail. Now, the state government has moved the dial slightly, but not even back to the point we were at a year and a half ago. And as a sort of looking at it from a federal perspective, we can't jump in and change the laws in a state. But we also can't afford to wait 18 months until a state election. So what we're saying is actually on knife crime and on bail laws, we want to sit the premiers down, get them all around a table, have a discussion and say, look guys, we need some national minimum standards for these things because we cannot just let states allow people to feel unsafe in their homes. It's completely unacceptable.
That's right. So that's very important part, people feeling unsafe recently, and the crime incident increasing every year, and especially I live in Boxer area, so it's not as safe as before. So we all understand it's a state government responsibility about the Victoria Police Force, but also like federal members, we can talk with the state government how we can make it better, make it a safer place to live. And also in your electorate case, I think it's happened a lot of cases, and you receive a lot of feedback, right?
I have. So my electorate has the largest Chinese diaspora in Australia, and second is Katie's, and I think fifth is Kooyong, 5th or 6th. And so that's why we take a really keen interest in that feedback.
That's right.
And same, when I go door knocking or meet with people in my office, they don't just refer to the headline incidents like the young doctor who was killed in Doncaster or the family that were held hostage in Donvale. We hear reports of every street, just about every street. And what I sadly hear is families will go to the police with footage from CCTV and they'll feel like it's not properly investigated. And there are broader issues with police resourcing and what the morale of the police force, but also a willingness to take those concerns seriously. And so for those who are watching or wondering what bail laws are, let me just refresh what a bail is. So if a young person is accused of a crime and we believe in the presumption of innocence, we don't necessarily send them to jail. And so bail is a way to say, well, I'll have some conditions on you until your case is heard. But because the courts have such a long wait time, that can be a year, 18 months. So then if someone commits another crime, they'll come back. And really then, if you're on your second offence, you don't deserve bail. Bail is not a right, it is a privilege. But what we have seen in the state of Victoria is that if you're under 18, bail has been as of right. So young people have been committing crimes and coming back again and again and again. And in each one of those occasions, there are victims. There are victims, and not just property crime, but physical, violent crime. And so we have been working with our state colleagues to say that you can't have that presumption of bail anymore. And it's not helping young people to do that, to keep committing crimes. So you've seen organised crime look to people who are under 18 and use them to commit the crime because, as Amelia said, there's a perception that it's consequence-free.
Yeah.
And I'll add one more point. If you have gone down the Eastern Freeway or on all the key roads, you can't read any signs because they're covered in graffiti. There's rubbish across all of Melbourne.
Yeah.
I think that's contributing to this as well because this doesn't look like a city that cares anymore. So whilst a lot of this is a state issue, if crime is worrying you and you want to send a message to the state Labor government that they're not listening, that's what this federal election is a chance to do. And in these particular seats, if more people vote against Labor, they will then take notice and they will say, well, actually, we didn't listen to you like we should have. So elections are a chance to send a message, whatever level of government the issue is.
Yeah.
Yes, that's a great point. 所以我们刚才讨论了在维州发生的多起的一些恶性事件，还有青少年犯罪的问题。其实三位都有讨论到相应的一些方案，因为我们有了解到州的法律来决定了这个保释法案的一个进程，但是联邦呢不能够直接进行干预，但是联邦议员可以积极推动当地的state member 州议员来进行相应的进行改革，还有进行一些提高所以像这个 Dr. Katie Allen 提到的，我们要 spend money to the right place.
Yeah.
We need to spend money wisely. We are like undersourcing for
priorities
yes. We have no police officers elsewhere anywhere. We many police stations shutting down.
Mount
right?
Waverley.
Mount Waverley one. Yes, my friends works there before. Is lose their job, and we have to spend money to the right place. 就是我们一定要把钱花到最正确的位置上。就是我们怎么样能够推动，让钱有更多的钱去招募更多的警员来去参与到保护这个州的治安的问题上，是个非常重要的。Amelia mentioned about the just working with the state member closely. That's very great point. So 说联邦议员和我们的州议员要紧密的合作，才能够促进我们州的治安和环境有很好的提升。包括我们三级政府一定不是分离的，一定是合作在一起，能够推动我们相应的一些法律去推进，还有一些关注我们这个安全的问题放到一个重点的议程上来。所以联邦议员可以去 working closely with the state member. So that's very important. 然后Keith just mentioned about the graphic. It's a very big part. 我们可以看到整个在我们的维州很多地方有涂鸦很脏乱的涂鸦，其实也是由于这些我们青少年的一些犯罪的人员可能造成的。所以这样对市容市貌造成的一些不好的影响，也会形成一种破窗的效应让我们这个城市会越来越不好。所以非常感谢三位有提到的，我们虽然说作为联邦层面我们不能够直接干预到我们地方警力的一些部署，但是我们可以 working closely actively with the local member, the state member. So that's very, very important. And you know, like for me, I'm the first generation of immigrant from China. So we live here, we live in Australia, we think it's a very safe place. So we want to keep it prosperity and safety as well. So all the Chinese community thinking the same way. So it's very important to the people, and not only for the Chinese community and also for the minority or all the ethnic groups. So they need safety. So well done. All right, so 我们现在呢会讨论一下，看看三位对于 healthcare 还有我们的整个的移民政策是一个什么样的观点。Let's wrapping things up. A lot of people are really concerned about everyday's issue, like how hard and expensive to see a doctor, and it depends on the Medicare and bulk billing. Right. So what's the Liberal Party's plan to make healthcare more affordable and accessible?
Katie needs to say she's a doctor.
It's your point, Katie.
I was saying my mother always wanted me to be a doctor, and she is so disappointed in me. And I know I'm a failure. So Katie can, because I'm a failure, Katie can ask me.
Yeah.
Well, I suppose the first thing to say is Australia does have, I believe, the best healthcare system in the world, and we should all, celebrate the fact that we've got wonderful doctors and nurses and allied health, and that it is a universal system that everyone can access it. And that's not true in other countries, but there is no doubt we're all hearing every day that people are finding it hard to go, to pay to go to the doctors because of the out-of-pocket costs have been rising.
Yeah.
Now, that's from a number of different reasons. It's worth saying that the cost of living crisis is making people decide between whether they go to the doctors for a checkup or for preventative health, or even if they go to the doctors for other reasons. And that's not right. We want people to be looking after their health, because a healthy person and a healthy family makes for a healthy community, makes for a prosperous nation. So health is very central to all of us, and we all want to have a healthy life for ourselves and our children. But, just like other businesses, businesses are under pressure, GPs are under pressure with rising rental costs, with rising costs of medicines, and with rising electricity bills. All of those pressures also affect GPs. And we know that they have increased costs, and so a coalition-elected government would commit $9.6 billion to helping support GPs to do the wonderful work that they do. That within that also includes $400 million for increase in mental health services. We know since COVID that people are still continuing to deal with the after effects of what's been an incredible pandemic. And when we were in government, we increased the amount of free Medicare rebated mental health sessions from 10 to 20. That was cut by Labor down to 10. So an elected government would recommit to increasing them to 20. 20 is what is needed, really, because these things take time to help people go through what's been a very stressful period of time. But the other thing about it is, of course, just like the economist sitting here with me, there's a supply-demand issue. So it can be hard to get in to see a GP. And so we have committed, and this has been our policy now for over 18 months, to increase the amount of GPs being trained. So we've committed $400 million to incentivise people to choose to be general practitioners and encourage them to take up bonded positions in rural areas as well, to make sure accessibility is important. And I think, it's pretty clear at the leaders' debate between Peter Dutton and Anthony Albanese. Anthony Albanese is championing that it only takes a Medicare card to go to see a doctor, and Peter Dutton asked the audience member who was asking that question, is that true? Do you also need something else? And she said, I always need my credit card as well. Now, in Chisholm, unfortunately, we're seeing a drop in Medicare bulk billing. It's dropped from 90% to 80% just during the time that Labor has been in government. So they are not managing the healthcare system in the way that we need and we deserve. It's such an important thing for all citizens of Australia. And non-citizens, quite frankly, all the people living in Australia, I should say. And so an elected government that's a coalition government are very, very dedicated to putting health front and centre, health and mental health. And I'd just like to make this point. There has been a massive Mediscare campaign against Peter Dutton. He was a health minister. He understands the healthcare system. And one of the great things that he did when he's healthcare minister or health minister was to introduce the Medical Research Future Fund, which was a $20 billion future fund, which has given Australia the capability and capacity to be the best research country for medical research in the entire world. And the benefits are already flowing. Better healthcare for heart, for genetics, for mental health. And these are things that were started by Peter Dutton. So he is a man who's putting health front and centre for this country, and I back him at every step of the way.
It's great to hear because I'm myself is a health professional.
Yes, you are.
So
You are.
I'm a registered nurse.
Oh, there you go.
So for my experience, I'm feeling like more and more GP clinic is not bulk billing anymore. And I have to pay out of pocket. And also I receive a lot of feedbacks from people who go to the GP because of it's too expensive, so they decided not to go in to see a GP.
Yes.
So that is their socioeconomic status will getting worse. So that is not a health status for them at all. So and because they're afraid of to pay the money, so that is not good.
Not good.
And this kind of trend is keep increasing. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So Katie mentioned a very good point. Say they get the very good initiate. They get 9.6 billion support for the JPs. 会有96亿的澳元的对于 GP 的支持包括有4亿对于 mental health 的支持，都是刚才 Dr. Katie Allen 所提到的，在如果新的联邦政府自由党的联邦政府会能够带给大家的一些医疗的福利，同时呢还有他们会增加从10次到20次的去看我们mental health， 就是我们精神问题的 session， 就是免费的服务，就会有增加10次以上。其实这些都是对于我们普通的老百姓最关心的问题，而且也是跟我们每个人的生活息息相关的。So any points from your electorate, like any status?
Oh yeah, we hear exactly the same thing. So in Kooyong, we've actually seen the biggest fall in bulk billing rates in the entire state. So that's been a 16% fall, which means in the last 3 years there've been 300,000 appointments, which were previously bulk billed appointments, which are now not. Which is just a huge number, and the problem is that sometimes when people say, oh well look, if I really want to see a particular doctor for something particularly important, okay, I'll pay, but the reality is that sometimes you just need to go to the doctor to get a prescription updated, and then suddenly you're paying $100, and you go, it's so expensive. Or people who have to go to the doctor every week, or the other one that comes up a lot is either pensioners is one, but the other group is young people who are living at home with their parents, and they want to be financially independent, but they say it's a quarter of my week's earnings if I went to the doctor, or half my week's earnings because they're just working casually. And it means that these young people can't be independent, which I think is a really bad thing as well. So we just need to make sure that we can increase those bulk billing rates across the board, so that anyone who wants to see a bulk billed doctor can do that without having to, wait for a really long time or travel a really long way.
Yeah, that's great.
Can I just add one thing that's I've drawn from the Chinese community is the focus on being active. And particularly in the seniors community, if you go to Box Hill Gardens, you'll see people doing Tai Chi, playing table tennis. In the seniors groups, you'll see people doing karaoke, line dancing, and having fun and that human connection. I think we often undervalue that importance for health. And I think there's a variation of a Chinese saying that health is wealth.
Of course.
It really is. And so that health that matters to all of us is something we take seriously, and that's why in our various electorates we've been proud to invest in community open space, sporting infrastructure, and really supporting the clubs that keep people connected. And that's very important to us.
Yeah, it's about two parts, mental health and physical health.
Yeah.
So we need to both of them to build up a healthy people.
Yes.
A healthy person.
Yeah, I went to a similar seniors centre as well, and they said, oh, you want to play some table tennis? And I said, oh yeah, no problem. And these guys, maybe they were like 70, 80 years old, and they just completely destroyed me. Embarrassing.
Great game.
我们刚才其实也有讨论到，就是因为我们公共医疗的这个服务，目前来说有很多的 GP 的诊所都已经不是全免费的了，就已经不是全部 bulk billing 的。同时呢，Amelia 刚才也提到，我们在倡导很多年轻人 有看病困难的问题，然后不能够支付高额的医疗费用。其实如何提高我们的 Medicare cover 的范围，还有 bulk billing 的这个比率，是一个非常重要的问题。Kiss 也有提到，他在接触到华人的这个老年群体的时候，在 Box Garden 会有很多人在打太极，这是一个非常好的一些活动来提高我们的身心健康，包括尤其是对我们华人群体和亚裔群体来说，可以提高我们参加我们的活跃程度，而且能够让我们的身心更健康，这都是一个非常好的方式。Also, we are facing with the aging population. That's a big issue. We see a lot of senior groups in different community hubs, community centers. So how do you support this kind of people, especially with ethnical background?
I mean, one thing I'd say first is I think the Chinese community does an amazing job of caring for its elderly people. I think maybe, some Australian, and people, it's sort of, I'd say much better job than my community does, to be honest. I think it's really impressive the way that people, they live with their elderly parents and, take care of them until they're at an old age and don't just leave them to the system and say, oh, see you later, you're going in the old folks' home, which I think is just a great testament to that. To the community. And I think that's fantastic. And the more that we can allow people to stay at home for longer, it has better outcomes for their health. It has better outcomes for their well-being and their happiness. And the more connection they have to other people, the better. Because one of the biggest problems for our elderly community is actually that loneliness.
Yes.
And going down to these senior centres where there are activities, seeing people who are living with their family and that sort of thing. I think that's really, really, really beautiful. And I think that's something that a lot of Australians could learn from the Chinese community. And we need to respect our elders, and we need to make sure we take care of them.
That is tradition, respect the elders.
Yeah, exactly.
And also for the ethnic groups, they get a big problem is the language barriers.
Yeah.
For the elderly people, elderly groups, so they don't speak language. You can't understand a lot of content, and they can't access to the information. So that's why how to bridge in the gap is very important from different community center or different community hubs. So we try to bridge in the gap to help them understand what is Australia's value and how live a better life in Australia.
Yeah, we also know that more and more Australians are living longer, which is great, but more and more also getting dementia. And we know that as people age and develop dementia, that they often revert to their childhood languages and cultural practices and the comfort foods of childhood. So it's really interesting. There's a wonderful Chinese aged care centre in Donvale, and it'd be great to see. Yeah, exactly. And there's also Jewish care that is also very culturally appropriate for people. And we know now in aged care facilities about 50% of people do have dementia. So it's important to be able to provide those supportive services that are culturally specifically supportive and also from a linguistically supportive.
That's a very important part because people who live with dementias, they lose the short memories. They only remain the long-term memories. So they only remember, okay, what is the childhood like when they grow up? So I dealing with a lot of senior groups who come across the same problem. 我们刚才有跟Dr. Katie Allen 有提到的，就是现在在他的倡导之下是非常关注在有老年痴呆的人群，因为这些人群呢，尤其是当他短期记忆退化了以后呢，他会更回归于尤其他儿时的记忆会有一些长期记忆的留存，所以他最保留最原始的语言像我们的华人群体，他只是会理解他最原始的一些语言和基础，他会大力的支持这些老年的群体，然后能提高他们的福祉。Yeah, great. So we will helping more ethnic group people to understand. What I received the feedback is they don't understand the policies, so they haven't get the resources to understand and to access to the resources. So, what's your opinion to help them to understand more about your information? Because actually, you represent for your electorate, and you are responsible for delivering the messages. How would you deliver this kind of message?
I think in elections, there's a focus on policies, but we mustn't lose sight of values as well. And the Labor Party has values, and they're very proud values, and they should be proud of them. But we have our values as Liberals, and we're proud of those. And our values at their core are about empowering people to be their best, and that when they work hard, they'll get rewarded for that.
Yeah.
And so many would be noting that they're working really hard, but here in Victoria, they're paying more taxes than they ever have before. They're working really hard and they're seeing more crime and rubbish around the streets. They're working really hard and they're still struggling to pay the bills. So in those circumstances, you focus on policies, but say, well, which political party is focused on bringing value back to the economy so that we're more prosperous and that we're more secure? And so at its heart, our values are free people, free enterprise, and then protecting our community and also all the institutions that keep us safe. That's in our DNA. And so if those values resonate with you, and I think they do with a lot of the Chinese community, then I think the onus is on us to talk more about those as much as our policies.
And also in a language specific, I mean, I think it's very important to know that we're all on WeChat. It's really important that we reach out and you know, using Mandarin or Cantonese to reach the Chinese diaspora. And we've all had information translated to ensure that those who don't have as good English as they might for policy can access it, whether it's by emails or by mail out letters. Or by DLs that we all have, and core flutes as well, which are the signs we put up politically. And we'd like to feel that we're very accessible. We have staff members who can speak Mandarin and Cantonese to make sure that if people have specific questions, and I know Keith's very good as a Member of Parliament answering every single question that he gets put. He runs a very sharp office and cares deeply for his constituents. And I know when I was in the Member for Higgins, it's a large workload, but important workload, because as a Member of Parliament, you are the voice for 120,000 people.
Of course.
And no problem is too small, too big for us to try and address it. Whether you can address it, sometimes a different matter, but to listen and to act.
That's very important. And also when you get the official communication channel, so people don't get the faulty information from elsewhere. So they can directly contact you or your office, and so get the direct information which is correct, give the right directions.
And maybe we add. I know Keith's been talking about values, but maybe we should just talk quickly about some of the policies too that we're bringing to the next election.
That's great.
Because we're talking about cost of living more broadly, but some of the things that we're going to do that'll actually help people out there. So the first one is there's a tax on fuel. Right, so every bit of petrol you buy has quite a lot of tax. What we want to do is a 25 cents a litre reduction in the tax on that fuel, which will save people when they go to fill up their car 25 cents a litre. On average, it's about $15 a tank, but that also flows through to all the costs of groceries and all the other things that have fuel in it. So I think that's going to have a really big impact. The second thing is a tax offset for 80% of taxpayers. So 80% of taxpayers, people who earn up to $144,000 on average, will be able to get $1,200 back on their tax bill, which again, I think will really, really help people. And the third one is more around first home buyers, and I think it's a really exciting policy, which is what we're saying is that if you buy a new first home, you get to deduct the interest costs of your mortgage from your tax bill. So it's a bit like, you know, when people can do negative gearing, and a lot of people say, oh, well, investors get to do that, but why don't we? If we buy it, well, we're saying, well, actually, you should get to do it too. And you should get to deduct the interest off your tax bill as a first home buyer as well. And I think that's
on new builds.
On new builds.
Which is going to help increase supply.
Exactly.
So there's some pundits saying, oh, will that increase house prices? And our argument is it's going to increase supply, which is what we need to do. We need to make sure that we don't want to plummet house prices, but we want to increase supply, because supply is the issue that's holding up people being able to get affordable housing.
And if I could add one more, a policy which is important, is the role of energy. And so we have a long-term energy plan to have an all-options energy system that sees renewables plus gas plus reliable modern nuclear. And out of the top 20 peer economies, we're the only one that either doesn't have or moving to nuclear. So we think for this country that doesn't make sense. We also, in the short term, want to see more gas into the system. And Australia has an abundance of gas, but we often send it overseas for contracts that are then sold back to us. So we've got an East Coast reservation policy to have more gas that isn't committed to current contracts to come back into the system. And then finally, many people will cook with gas, particularly from Asian countries. And for some reason, the state Labor government here doesn't want people to cook with gas. Now, gas is a great transition fuel because it's in abundance in the ground here. It has about a quarter of the CO2 emissions of coal, and it allows for people to keep themselves warm, to cook in the way that they want to cook. And so we are not an anti-gas party. We think it's a very important fuel in the short term for bringing energy prices down.
And electric
for
box
transit.
is so bad. Hey, electric box not good. It doesn't have the same effect.
Exactly.
And for the transition, you're right.
对，我们刚才三位有提到呢，其实自由党有带来很多包括这次大选他们带来的一些非常有利的政策包括 Amelia 提到的一些我们对于住房的政策，尤其是对于年轻人住房的一些政策的支持然后包括我们 Kiss 有提到的一些我们新的能源的一些引入和一些清洁能源的一些支持。还有Katie Allen 刚才有提到的，就是说我们会增加更多的房子住房的资源，让更多的第一代人能够住得起房子，能够买上自己的房子。其实这些都是一些非常关键的他们会带来的政策。那他们其实还有很多关键的一些政策会提出可以去关注他们的竞选的进一步的细则。I just mentioned about you bring up very good policies. And I introduced to the Chinese communities as well. So if they're interested for your further policy things, they can look into your website and your policies and your pamphlet. And that's a good way to let people know you.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And WeChat, we're on.
And WeChat. 同时呢，他们三位呢 Amelia, you get WeChat as well, right?
I'm on WeChat now.
Great. So
I
同时呢
can't read anything on it properly.
It's great. It takes time.
Learn Chinese.
And Kiss is an expert.
Yeah.
If you think the voice
Pete,
is
I
from-
hear he speaks fluent Chinese.
Oh, yeah, the Financial Review said that, yeah.
同时呢，他们三位呢也建立了自己的微信的频道，其实呢就是为了更进一步的能够跟我们的居民、跟我们的市民能够和我们的社区能够更融洽的去沟通和更顺畅的去沟通。如果有任何的官方的消息，他们也会第一时间通过相应自己的官方的平台向大家去传输，所以避免大家有一些错误的信息来源。所以这是一个非常好，他们愿意接近我们华人社区，然后了解我们华人心声的一个途径。So it's a great opportunity to build up your channel, and you get the channel to communicate with the Chinese community, and you receive the feedbacks and direct from people. It's not from someone else, it's directly from the people.
It's democracy.
Yeah, that's democracy. That's very important. And we come across very serious, not very serious, it's a good topic. So what do you think if Liberal Party to empower, and what do you think the position for Australia to dealing with China and the United States? It's a pretty sharp question, huh?
As in Australia dealing with the United States?
Yeah, how do Australians position to dealing with the relationship with China and the United States?
Sure.
Yeah.
Like any other country, when we approach dealings with other nations, we do it with respect, and we do it with a focus on our values and our interests. And so Australia is a democracy that believes in free markets and a secure world order that focuses on trade. That's always something that's important to us and will be to the community. So whether it's dealing with the United States, and we have significant history with the United States, or it's dealing with our region and in China, we will always do it respectfully and promote dialogue. Because whilst countries compete, you can compete in a way that helps everyone, the tide lift for all, when you talk more. So I think dialogue, particularly through our official channels, through ambassadors and foreign affairs, but also through, I look forward to having Amelia and Katie as colleagues, and they, like me, I would recommend that they do a parliamentary trip to China. I was on a bipartisan trip to China in October. I went to Shanghai and Beijing, and that's important. That's part of that dialogue where we're talking to each other. Because it's too often, if we don't talk, we'll have perceptions that are not true. But when you go and talk, you see things with your own eyes, and seeing is believing. And so I would recommend to my friends to my left and right that when they're elected, that they do a similar trip as well.
That's great. So if you get to know about China, or if you get to more about China, you know the policies and what policies is the best choice and for the best interest of Australians.
Can I add one thing? Sorry, bullet trains. I
Yeah.
would love for us to have bullet trains here in Australia.
But it also works at every level, whether it's, through business to business connections. I was in medical research and visited China several times.
Yeah.
The medical profession has very strong ties with China. It's very important to exchange knowledge and to exchange, to learn from each other. And,
That's right.
and those layers throughout. And Chinese diaspora have strong connections with China through their businesses, and we really value that.
Yeah.
I worked at a Chinese-Australian fintech company called Airwallex, which many you may have heard of. Many people who run businesses use it to do their payments between China and Australia or between other countries and Australia. And what was very interesting working at Airwallex is because it was a business that had people in Australia, but also in Hong Kong, also in Shanghai, also in all over the world. I would be in a meeting and we'd be talking about some kind of technology issue or sales issue or something, and half the room in the meeting would be in Shanghai, and you wouldn't even know, but we're all just cooperating. And I think sometimes we tend to think, people are in China and people are in Australia. The reality is we're all working together all the time in a global world.
Yeah.
We've got to just keep having those relationships and just having that embedded flow of information and ideas and people between the two countries.
Yeah, that's very important. And especially for the Chinese people, and they're also concerned of one particular policy is about immigrant policy. So as a federal MP, and also for your do you have any policies for immigrants in the future, especially for this part? Chinese Australians community very hoping to be heard as well. So what do you think about the policy you will make?
Yeah, I wasn't born in Australia, and so I'm an immigrant too.
Yeah.
And Australia has a long bipartisan, which means both parties support a generous migration scheme. And that's important. It's been in our interests, and that will be going forward. But there has been a number that has been proportionate for the state governments in particular to respond. And that number is about 220,000 per year. That's the 10-year historical average. That allows states then to build the freeways, schools, hospitals, preserve green space. In the last 2 years, it went to 500,000 per year. That has put enormous strain on the state government of Victoria to respond. So they have struggled to keep graffiti off the streets, to respond to crime, to stop congestion, to make sure that we preserve open space.
Have enough houses.
And have enough houses. So I think it's migrant families who tell us that number has to be manageable, and I think that's something we will turn to straight away. But another thing is Victoria is struggling to build the infrastructure we need because there's an extra tax that everyone pays, which is the CFMEU union tax. To build a kilometre of road here or a tunnel costs 30% more than it does in Sydney or Adelaide or Brisbane. And the reason it does is because there's inefficiencies and, in some instances, open corruption at a monumental scale. And so everyone is paying for that in Victoria, everyone. So we would like to see that the rule of law is returned to big construction sites, that you won't see people intimidated, that organised crime don't have a position in the construction office of whether it's the North East Link or the SRL. We make sure that those are serving the people and not serving the special interests of unions, and then bring those prices of construction down.
Yeah. Victoria has been, it is such a bad place for anyone to do business at the moment. You see so many people businesses moving to Queensland, moving to Sydney, anywhere but Victoria. The only sector the opposite is happening is organised crime. They all say this is a great place to do business, we're all going to move our headquarters to Victoria. And that is shocking.
I was just door knocking yesterday, and we talk about these facts and figures, and I spoke to this guy, and he was in construction. And I said, what sort of construction? He said, I'm in residential construction. And I said, so is it true that it's, you find it more expensive than your friends or other business partners in other states? And he said, yeah, it's about 30% more expensive.
Yeah.
He just said that number. And I said, what about, I understand it's actually expensive from a taxes point of view.
Yeah.
And someone said, that the amount people talk about to build is about 40% of it is due to taxes and to regulation and to red tape. And he said, no, it's more than that.
Yeah.
More than that. It's tough doing business in Victoria at the moment, and that is a direct response from the government or lack of government leadership in this state.
I think from the status, we lost 30% of the small business to
29,000.
29, yeah.
And more of those
Yeah.
per head in Victoria than anywhere else.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
We want to. Victoria is a beautiful place. It's like Melbourne. We love Melbourne. So we want
Yes.
this is a prosperity and also is a good place, safety place for everyone. So we want to bring it back.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's great. Let me search about some comments from our viewers. They get one question about the free vaccinations. So do we have any policy for the public health and the free vaccinations to supporting the residents?
Well, we've got a very good national immunisation program, and we will always look at new vaccines as they become available. We introduced the RSV vaccine for the under fives, and we have a regular flu vaccine program. And as you know, the coalition government oversaw the rollout of the COVID vaccine program, which underpins such good health responses in this country. So we will always look to make sure that our economy is strong so that we can pay for the new vaccines as they become available, like the HPV vaccine, which is one that has been a great success here in Australia.
Okay, great. 其实我们刚才有回答的我们听众的一些提问，包括我们的一些免费的疫苗，还有我们的一些公共的安全。其实我们现有的政策呢，很多都是有在支持我们这个公众医疗的一些部分。我们可以持续的关注，包括有进一步想了解，还是这个问题有进一步想了解3位的一些主张的政策，还有一些倡导的话，请关注他们个人的一些网页，还有他们所即将来到的联邦大选的一些信息有助于帮您去甄别他们的政策是不是利于我们民生，以及对我们民生到底有没有帮助，这个是非常重要的。I just advocate for all our viewers to go to your website to check more information about yourself, because this is a very short period of time for the interview, and people want to know more about yourself, your family, and also your story. So it's a good opportunity to let people know what you're standing for and what you advocate for. So people say, go to your website and search more informations and make the right choice. All right. Any more questions from the comment? I think. Yeah, and also our viewers mentioned about they want cheaper electricity. So that is about, you mentioned like nuclear power.
Cheaper power.
Yeah,
So,
cheaper power.
and there's the here and now, and then there's the long-term power.
Yeah.
So we would deregister.
Yes, we would deregister the CFMEU. And also, there's no point in having a law if it's not enforced. And so that's why we have a police force.
Yeah.
We used to have a police equivalent for the construction sector, and it was the Australian Building and Industry Commission, which was there to make sure that this sort of lawlessness didn't happen. That was disbanded by Labor. So we would have that cop on the beat brought back so that we make sure that going forward this doesn't happen again, because this is a constant cycle. And particularly in Victoria, there used to be a union before the CFMEU called the BLF. And then, like a phoenix rising from the ashes, they just changed their name. So Labor will try and say they're dealing with this, but it's often smoke and mirrors. You need an actual cop on the beat to make sure the rules are enforced, and that is the Commission. So we would seek to reintroduce that.
Can I mention something about energy prices? Because, of course, energy, as Amelia rightly said, underpins our economy in so many ways. And Australia has done so well as a nation. It's been so prosperous because we've had cheap available energy. And we have been very dependent on coal-fired power stations. And there is a commitment by both sides in a bipartisan way to move to a clean energy transition. But there is a difference of opinion about how to get there. So Labor's view is as a renewables only, with a small 3% of batteries, 97% renewables. We don't think that's practical, and we think that will just increase prices. We think that we need to have an approach which transitions us off coal-fired power stations through gas, and to move to a vision of the future which will include modern forms of nuclear energy, as other nations are doing, as Keith rightly said. It's worth saying there is an argument in the press about which is the cheapest form long term. And I would encourage people to go and look at the recent debate between Ted O'Brien and Chris Bowen. And Ted O'Brien, who's the Shadow Minister for Energy, the Alternative Energy Minister, gave extremely good arguments for why in the long term, over the next decades, it will be cheaper to have nuclear as part of the mix. But you don't need to just rely on TED or on the Frontiers report. You could look at other countries and other states like California, which has a wonderful, remarkable renewables proportion of 60% renewables in that state, which is great. But they've recognised that they can't get to the 100% without some firming power, and they are increasing their nuclear. And the Biden administration has assessed that desire to increase, I think it's by 35 gigawatts, that overall that will bring down energy prices by about 35%. Now, that's obviously a long-term vision. We're often criticised as politicians for being short-term. It's only a 3-year cycle. This is a long-term vision. It's about bringing the Australian people on that journey, looking to other countries to learn about how to do it. But this year in particular, we believe that unleashing more gas, gas that's Australian gas for Australians, will help to bring those power prices down, will ease that cost of living, which means that we can help transition to a clean energy future without throwing the economy under the bus.
We urgently need the right direction. That's the point.
Get Australia back on track.
Exactly. And also, one question for Amelia. So, one viewers really want to know about the housing policies you want to bring up. So, do you want to expanding that one to talk about it?
Yeah, we can talk. So we've talked a little bit about this and how it's all about a supply and demand problem you've got in the housing market, which we've got too many people who want houses, and not enough people, and not enough houses for them. The way that we think about it is, well, you know, I made a decision to move back to Australia about 5 years ago. I lived overseas in the UK, but I came back here, and the reason I came back here is because in Australia you can have that Australian dream where you know, one day if you work hard and you do all the right things, you can buy yourself a home, maybe with a back garden and a bit of space, you know. What we believe in is saying, well, we actually want that to be a reality in the future for all Australians. Because at the moment it's feeling a little bit like maybe you work hard, you do all the right things and you don't necessarily get that Australian dream. What the Labor Party is proposing is that they're saying, look, we're going to build lots of apartments. But if you look in the market at the moment, there's a lot of apartments available, a lot of 2-bedroom apartments. And people are saying, well, the reason I live in Australia and the reason, you know, I've had members of the Chinese community tell me this. They say, well, the reason I live in Australia is because I want a nice house. You know, if I wanted to live in an apartment, you know, I might live somewhere else in the world.
That's right.
And what we want to do is put in place the right infrastructure so we can build more family homes. So we've got a $5 billion investment program into infrastructure in outer suburban, in regional areas. So we can build those homes and make more places in Melbourne, more places in Victoria, nice places to live where people can raise their families. We're going to bring down those construction costs by delisting the CFMEU and throwing them off federally funded projects. And then we're also going to see where we can kind of remove red tape and make it easier for people to start building the homes that they want. And then the last thing we're going to do is give those first home buyers a bit of a leg up in the market, whether it's through being able to invest some of your superannuation into your first home, or whether it's through being able to do those tax deductions on the mortgages. So I'm really excited by some of the policies that we've got. I think they're really going to help people, but they're not just going to help them buy their first home. They're not just going to help them have somewhere to live, but they're actually going to make sure that there's more homes that are the family homes, that what people really want in Australia.
Yeah, that's exciting. And also for the young people as well.
Yeah,
so
I think
they
so.
are surviving.
Yeah.
It's a lot of burden, the cost of living, and also they want to get their home. So they want a home.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's very important. And I'm an amount of them. Yeah.
Well, you know, it's a problem for all Australians. It's not, you know, young Australians want to get into their homes. You know, Australians with children at home want their children to get into homes
and want them to get out of their home.
Exactly. And grandparents worry about the future for their children and grandchildren because they feel they could afford a home and they want that dream for their children and grandchildren as well.
Yeah, great. And the last question is like we all know Chinese-Australian relationship is the key points if we want to make long-term relationship and also for make good economy to activating the Australians' economy back to normal again, and also for the Chinese Australian community. So it's very important to make these two countries get a good relationship, and also we have good policies. So hopefully you can hear more about what happening in Chinese Australian community, and also reflect the feedback from them and give some good policies and making the right route to go further. All right. Thank you so much. So that's all for today's interview. Thank you so much for the three distinguished guests, and thank you so much for all the audience and the viewers. So today we talk about the community safety and the bail law reform, and also talk about the economy and the Trump's tariffs, and also about the health and the immigration policies. I think they all give us a very good view of points how you're going to improve our living condition, and how they solve the problem we're currently facing with. So if you get any further questions, and for the upcoming federal election, go to their website, have a further look up and further review of their policies, and also their suggestions, advocate, and helping you make the right decision. And thank you so much for today's interview. And thank you for coming.
Thank you.
谢谢大家，我们今天就到此结束。如果您有更多的问题，可以给我们的节目留言，同时呢，也可以跟我们的议员还有我们的议员候选人直接进行交流。他们有他们的微信的账号，我们会分享到我们的群里面。同时呢，会有他们的官方网站，进一步的了解他们所带来的一些信息。